On April 29, 1992, a group of 6 young soldiers pulled off an incredible stunt when they seized power from the then president of Sierra Leone through a military coup. The man at the control of the coup was Valentine Strasser, a 25-year-old who then installed himself as the president of the country. Everyone has their version of the events that led to the coup and how Valentine came to power, but they all have a meeting point in the fact that he became the youngest person to be president of any African nation to this day. Many people tend to pick his story from the point in which he became president and how he lost power less than 4 years later, but there is a bigger story before and after he seized power. The early life of Valentine was a rather uneventful one for someone who would end up becoming the youngest head of state in the world. It was too uneventful that there were hardly many people that remembered a lot about it. Those that remembered never had the patience to go through the boring tales. But then, he seemed to be born a second time in 1985 after he enlisted in the Republic of Sierra Leone military forces. By the time he was 19, he was already commissioned into the Sierra Leone army, and it was after this that his legend began. In 1991, the rebel group Revolutionary United Front carried out an attack in Biu villages around the area where Valentine was posted. The young army officer and others were sent to handle the situation, but the fight was not one that was ready to end speedily. This was because in no time, the country was plunged into the Sierra Leone Civil War. At that time, the president of the country was Joseph Saidu Momo. While he was making headway at fixing the country which he inherited in a very bad shape, he also came with his own mistakes. But there was one that would lead to his end in power. The soldiers fighting in the raging war were ill-equipped. They were said to be using weapons that were used during the Second World War, and it failed them in the desperate situation. They demanded for better welfare, boots, and other necessities, but the government was not responsive. But again, that was not the worst thing the government did. They continued to delay the salaries of the soldiers. The soldiers found themselves meshed between a war that was claiming many lives and a government that was deaf. And so the soldiers decided to march into Freetown in protest over what was clearly a failure in leadership. Now, the intention of Valentine and his other 5 friends that led the protest was not to carry out a coup. They just wanted to air out their grievances, or so was it believed. The president of the country, on the other hand, had no way of knowing this was it. After all, it was an Africa that was coming out of the 1980s into the 1990s, a period that saw many attempted coups and counter-coups. One was at the neighboring Liberia in 1990. And so the moment he realized soldiers were already in Freetown and were heading to the State House, the man gave in to the adrenaline of flight. Before anyone knew, the man was already on his way to Conakry, Guinea, on a self-imposed exile. For Valentine Strasser, who had just celebrated his birthday a few days earlier, and with many soldiers at his command, the vacuum created by Momo's departure was nothing short of another birthday gift that came a few days late. He took control of the State House, and that was all. A 25-year-old young officer was now the president of Sierra Leone. For once in a long time, the hopes of the people was reawakened because they felt there was nothing better than a young, energetic man who fought injustice to now be in power. But this is where the story gets even more interesting. Amid all the brouhaha, Valentine Strasser was only but a young man with no experience in administration. He got caught up in the war that was leading nowhere, and before too long, the hopes of people were all dashed with the wind. No one could tell who was better between Strasser and the man he removed from power. 3 years, 8 months and 15 days after he seized power, Valentine was shown the way out through a military coup that was orchestrated by his deputy, Brigadier General Julius Maada Bio, who was 30 years old. The reason for the coup was simply because he was not satisfied with the style of leadership of Valentine. Before this coup, the young leader survived 2 previous attempts to be ousted. Strasser was still in his 20s when he lost power. He was arrested, handcuffed, and sent to Liberia on exile. He was subsequently flown to the UK and he began studying law at the University of Warwick in Coventry, England. He dropped out after a year and moved to the Gambia, but he was not allowed into the country. At this point, the man had no choice but to return to his home country, where the youngest president in Africa's history now began living a rather wretched life with no money, friends, and influence. That was not the end of his story with fate. The man suffered many health challenges for many years. The result of this is that his left leg was finally amputated in 2019, when a surgery was carried out on him in Ghana. According to reports, he opted to receive medical attention in Ghana because he had no means of going to the United States or Europe. He now lives in Sierra Leone in a better condition thanks to the president of the country and his former deputy, Julius Maada Bio. There have been claims that he is kept under house arrest, but there is still no certainty to this. Is there anything we left out about the youngest African president in history? Let us know in the comments section. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share.